Today's video. Today is Tuesday, July 22nd, 2025, and today we are going to be talking about Donald Trump's game plan for the 2026 midterm elections. A very interesting article came yesterday from Axios. I thought this was a quite interesting read, and I figured that we could go ahead and just unpack it together as it really hits on a lot of the points that I try to talk about when discussing Donald Trump's strategy ahead of the 2026 midterm elections. Now, if you've been watching these videos for quite some time, you might know that we talk a lot about Donald Trump being, quote, obsessed with the 2026 midterms. And I do believe that is the right word to use. When you're looking at the way that Donald Trump has navigated the Texas redistricting process, his engagements with electoral incumbents, his focus on the 26 midterms, and his approval rating, you start to see that he really is shaping up 2026 to be what defines his presidency. Now, looking at, just generally speaking, how presidential terms typically work. For about the first 2 years, if you come in with a trifecta, that is the meat of what you do. And we're about a quarter of the way done of this trifecta. We have 3/4 of it left. We're about 6 months into Donald Trump's administration. The House goes into recess tomorrow, actually, which we talked about in a video earlier on today that has been a point of frustration for many Republicans. But the point is that looking at where you are in 2026, that will be the defining moment for Donald Trump's presidency and how much Democrats win by, because it is a near guarantee that they do win the 26 midterms, especially the U.S. House of Representatives. You will find that that will determine how much Donald Trump can even do in his final 2 years in office. Now, looking at this article from Axios, they really do discuss a lot of what Donald Trump does, what Donald Trump worries about, how he's getting engaged and involved, and we're going to unpack it here. They go through a variety of different points, about 6 points here that they're going through. The thing that I love about Axios, by the way, which is why we use them all the time, is simply because they do a great job at actually giving you the information in a concise way. This is obviously not a sponsored video by Axios, but point is that I actually do appreciate a lot of what they put out. But let's get into the substance of what they want us to see and what they want us to take away in terms of Donald Trump, as they put it, is game planning for the 2026 midterm elections. So they start off by talking about how Donald Trump's biggest asset is his political operation and the amount of money that they're able to fundraise. Donald Trump supposedly is doing a huge RNC fundraiser in D.C. this fall. We saw that J.D. Vance and Donald Trump have been doing some fundraisers over the past 6 months. The most recent one, I think, with J.D. Vance was a sit-down meal where it was $25,000 or $10,000 a ticket at that point. I mean, that rakes in huge amounts of money that can be allocated to Senate races, House races, gubernatorial races, and it looks like he's going to maintain a pretty average active presence in terms of fundraising and engagement with the National Republican Party. So it looks like there's going to be Donald Trump's political big names, James Blair, Tony Fabrizio. If you recognize the Fabrizio name, it's probably because we just talked about a poll from Fabrizio Ward, which is a polling group that did all of Donald Trump's polling in the last cycle. They're back again. They're going to be doing a speech at the donor retreat by Speaker Mike Johnson. So a lot of different things here where Donald Trump is going to remain involved in the 26 midterms, largely because he can raise a lot more money than Mike Johnson can, a lot more money than many other Republican Senator John Thune, leader on the Republican side in the United States Senate. I mean, he's not going to be raising all of this money. It's going to be Donald Trump who does it. And so it looks like if Donald Trump's able to set up these fundraising vehicles, as they put it, for these candidates, it'll give Donald Trump the ability to go to Pennsylvania and Michigan and Wisconsin and Georgia and Arizona and North Carolina and Nevada and other states and raise a lot of money for the candidates that he wants to win. So that's a big part of it. But beyond money, you have to take a look at the candidates themselves. The White House is actively trying to find good candidates to run in several key races. Now, this is actually a bit of a difference than what we're used to. The White House is actively looking for Republicans to run in a political capacity in the 26 midterms. Traditionally speaking, this is handled by state parties, local parties, even sometimes the national party. But to see it to this degree where Donald Trump himself is actually making calls in Pennsylvania. He said that I want Dan Muser to run for governor, picked up the phone, called him, said, I will endorse you. In fact, I'm making a post on Truth Social right now about how much I want you to run for governor. You should run. Call ends. Dan Muser says, I'm not running, right? But these things happen, and they're coming directly from the Oval Office and Donald Trump's top officials who are trying to get the best candidates possible in Donald Trump's eyes, which we all know how that goes in previous midterms. But the point is, his involvement is going so far as trying to actually pull the candidates himself. Now, looking at the third point here, this is what we've been talking about for quite some time. Early redistricting. Donald Trump is pushing for Texas Republicans, yes, to redraw the state boundaries. Why? To give Republicans at least 5 new seats in the next election. 5 new seats in the next cycle. Democrats right now need just 5 seats to win the majority. Less than that, actually. But if Republicans take away 5 from the Democrats right now, 5 that are pretty solid and locked in for 2026, it makes it that much more difficult for Democrats to see a pathway to victory in 2026. It'll still happen, but it is becoming more difficult. And so Donald Trump is intentionally trying to do a completely unorthodox move, changing the boundaries of a congressional map in the middle of the decade, all to benefit a political party that already holds 2/3 of seats in the state of Texas. He wants 75% out of the state, and he just might get it. We'll see what happens. But this early redistricting also might have some pushback from Democrats across the board in states like California and New Jersey and New York, but we'll have to wait and see. Now, Donald Trump's administration also is very adamant that this big, beautiful bill is going to be popular the longer that you sit on it. But it doesn't seem like that really is, in anybody's eyes, a reality. But still, the White House believes their pathway to 2026 is going to rely on selling this bill to the American public, saying it's for the greater good. It's for the benefit of X, Y, and Z. These are the things that Donald Trump and his administration are going to try to sell and say, this is where we're at. We should get, the White House. We should be pushing out constant different talking points about why this bill is beneficial to the American public, but the American public just simply isn't buying it. I've always taken problem with the Republican Party's obsession recently with this one big, beautiful bill, as they put it. Not everybody finds it beautiful. In fact, the majority of this country just simply doesn't like it, and I think that is really a huge difficulty for the GOP, which is that the majority of the American public oppose this bill in everything that it stands for, even in some of its more minute parts that Republicans thought might be more popular. And when the American public finds out that there isn't going to be no tax on tips, or that the extent at which you will find these Medicare cuts are actually going to be as expansive and as detrimental as the nonpartisan institutes have expected them to be, tens of millions of Americans completely cut off from their health care due to a variety of different changes in requirements or in eligibility. The Republican Party is, pretty much just saying at a whim here. It doesn't seem like there's any rhyme or reason as to why they're making these changes. It's just simply that they want less taxpayer-funded subsidies for some of the most disadvantaged people in the nation. You're finding that will have a very big impact, and people already don't like the bill. Anywhere ranging from 42 to 64% of this country says they oppose the bill. More Americans consistently in every poll say they oppose the bill more than they support it. And that matters. But the White House is convinced that they can keep selling it, that they can keep pushing it and saying, we're in a good position, this bill is good for you, you should like the bill. It might succeed. But chances are this is one of their pathways that, again, is short-sighted and is limited by the fact that Donald Trump and those around him are often short-sighted too in terms of their gain, in terms of their understanding of electoral politics, and what might work for Donald Trump in pushing, saying, no, you actually like this bill, you don't dislike it, only really works for Trump, and it doesn't look like it's going to work for Republicans in 2026. Now, the fifth point here is actually a very big one that I've commented on for quite some time now, is that Donald Trump is trying everything he can to stop Republicans from retiring in the House of Representatives. In the 2018 midterm elections, Democrats did very, very well. But a big reason they did well wasn't just that they were beating incumbents. Obviously, they defeated 30 Republicans that lost re-election to Democrats. But about 10 of these seats, about a fourth of all the seats won by Democrats in the 2018 midterms, were because Republicans had vacated these seats and ultimately gave Democrats the upper hand by removing that incumbency advantage. When you take a look at retirements, some very notable ones came from 18 Democrats, but 37 Republicans just simply did not seek re-election. And what is interesting, too, is that when you take a look at some of these retirements, sure, some of them decided to run for Senate or governor, but most of them just retired. Paul Ryan, the Speaker of the House of Representatives at the time, also chose to retire. And now thinking about where we are today, when you look at a lot of these retirements, they actually aren't for just the sake of retiring. A lot of them are actually because they want to run for office. In fact, almost every single Republican that is deciding to retire doesn't seem to be doing it out of this idea they might lose in 2026. Even though they might know they're going to lose, they're deciding to run for another political office. Only Don Bacon in Nebraska's 2nd is retiring because of the fact that he wants to leave Congress. Everybody else wants to pursue higher office. It's a huge change from the retirements amongst Trump 1. And that's because the type of Republican that has come in after Trump won is different. A lot of these Republicans that actually retired in 2018 that were then followed up by more extreme Republicans, those Republicans are more beholden to Donald Trump and the White House. And so they actually listen when Donald Trump says, do not retire. You need to stay in this race because we need to hold on to your seat no matter what, and you need to go down fighting. It doesn't matter what you think is the right thing to do for you. It matters what's the right thing to do for Trump. And we actually saw that. We made a video on it about how Iowa Representative Zach Nunn, who had a very competitive race in the last cycle, won his race by about 3.8%, is expected to face an even more competitive race this upcoming midterm election. But he wanted to leave. Zach Nunn very publicly stated that he wanted to be governor of Iowa, that he would take on Rob Sand, who right now is the Democratic frontrunner on the gubernatorial race for Democrats. The only elected statewide Democrat in Iowa is running in the governor's race. Zach Nunn said, I want to run against him because I don't want to be in a toss-up seat for the rest of my life. And so what happened is Donald Trump called him and said, absolutely not. He called him and said, you're going to run for House. He posted on Truth Social before the conversation with Zach Nunn. He twisted his arm, and he's doing it all across the board. And this is actually one of the smarter political moves that I think the Trump administration is doing. When you look at the big, beautiful bill trying to sell it, when you look at this recruitment, I'm not thoroughly convinced that Donald Trump and those around him know who the most electable candidates are, or that they know how to market a bill that clearly the majority of the nation just simply doesn't like. But in terms of getting rid of retirements, saying, you simply cannot. We are at the lowest number of retirement announcements that we've seen in recent memory at this point, especially on the Republican side, especially with a Republican president. So Donald Trump is using his political capital and saying, you're not going to retire. You need to stay in the race because we need to win this race no matter what. And 90% of congressional incumbents win re-election with ease, right? Most of the time, if you are an incumbent, you can do very, very well. It is only in massive wave years that incumbents do get pushed out. And I do think Zach Nunn will get pushed out. But Donald Trump knows the chances of winning the House seat that Zach Nunn currently has with him as the incumbent is 25%. Without him, it's 10%. And he's willing, for that 15% difference in chance, to completely axe Zach Nunn's chances of being governor. Because should another Republican take over the governorship, it'll be 8 years. By then, Zach Nunn probably will be out of the House of Representatives, and his political capital will be gone. This would be the moment for him to run, as for many other Republicans, to leave their office, but Donald Trump is doing everything he can to stop it, and I actually think this is one of the few things that really do shine through as a smart political decision. The last thing here is that Donald Trump hopes to shape GOP primaries. This is something that I'm not that convinced is actually going to do that well for the Republican Party. I'm reminded constantly of how the 2022 midterms went when Joe Biden was less popular than Obama was in 2010, when Democrats lost 63 seats in the House of Representatives in 2010. Joe Biden was about 6 points more unpopular than Obama was then. And the generic ballot didn't look all that different. But looking at where it is in 2022, a big reason why Republicans didn't do well was Dobbs. But a second big reason was the type of candidates that they nominated. I think a better example can be shown in the 2024 Senate elections, where Donald Trump won nearly every single battleground state, where Republicans, lost nearly every single battleground state that Donald Trump won on the presidential level. They lost Wisconsin, they lost Michigan, they lost Arizona, they lost Nevada. The only one they won was in Pennsylvania, and that was by a fraction of a percentage point, less than a quarter of a point across the state. But Michigan, Wisconsin, Arizona, Nevada all went to the Democratic Party. Why? Eric Hovde was too extreme. Mike Rogers wasn't liked. Carrie Lake was a sore loser. Sam Brown was too extreme off the 22 primary that he ran in, where he tried to pivot ahead of 24. All of these races all had one common denominator, and that was Donald Trump's support in the primary and Donald Trump's push on the national stage. And while Donald Trump himself could deliver in many of these races, the types of candidates he chose didn't shake up to be the strongest nominees possible. And we knew that coming off 18, 20, 22, and of course 24, and now 2026. So my high-level takeaways from this is that Donald Trump clearly is obsessed with the midterms. The extent at which we were seeing this second Trump admin is significantly more involved than where they were the first time around. And it's fascinating because Donald Trump knows that after about a year and a half, Democrats will take the House majority, and he will be able to do absolutely nothing besides some court vacancies and court appointments, and that will be it. Donald Trump's game plan for the 26 midterms is a mixed bag for Democrats. On one end, there are some things that are not so great. On the other hand, in terms of candidate quality, candidate recruitment, and involvement in primaries, they actually probably come out in the net positive, Democrats being they, with Donald Trump's heavy involvement, because they know that he typically doesn't choose the right people, right? He endorsed Laura Trump already in the North Carolina Senate race. She's probably the worst candidate Republicans could nominate in 2026. And so thinking about the 26 midterms, thinking about how Donald Trump has really been engaging in the electoral process, not just now, but has been and continues to do so, it will be fascinating to see exactly how well the Trump acolytes or the Trump endorsees actually perform. Because while there may be some areas where Donald Trump is doing something better for the GOP, getting rid of these retirements rather than shoving people out because they don't agree with him, or, deciding to fundraise on their behalf, a lot of the other decisions that Donald Trump's hands-on approach in these midterms might actually serve to the detriment of the national GOP and lose them governing majorities that will prohibit Donald Trump and this White House from doing anything substantive after the 2026 midterm elections. So keep your eyes peeled. Watch as Donald Trump maneuvers in the next year and a half ahead of the midterms, because it looks like he's taking a very, very robust approach, even more than the first time he was in office. And it doesn't look like it's all going to be positive for the party he's hoping to help in these midterm elections. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already, and check out the Instagram and Twitter. At the top left of the screen, there's also a Discord server for you to go ahead and join on the screen. There's a video for you to watch, and then a playlist for my 2026 Senate election analysis videos. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all tomorrow.